The cleaner sitting in the most forbidden chair in the entire building had exactly 47 seconds before the most obsessive, controlling, and terrifying billionaire in the country walked through the door, and what he would discover about her in the next 5 minutes would shatter every assumption he had ever made about the world and set in motion a chain of events that would change both of their lives forever. Park Soo-min didn't know she was sitting in a chair worth more than her entire annual salary. She didn't know that the leather beneath her exhausted body had been custom crafted in Italy from a specific breed of cattle raised on a single farm in Tuscany. She didn't know that the chair's height, angle, and lumbar support had been calibrated to the exact millimeter specifications of one man's body. And she definitely didn't know that in the 3 years since this chair had been installed in the CEO's private office on the 57th floor of Haesung Tower, not a single human being besides its owner had ever touched it. Not the board members who visited for quarterly meetings. Not the executives who presented billion-dollar proposals. Not even the cleaning staff who maintained every other surface in the office with military precision. The chair was untouchable, and Soo-min was sitting in it. She had been on her feet for 16 hours. 2 jobs. The day shift at a restaurant that paid barely enough to cover her mother's medical bills, and the night shift cleaning offices in buildings where people made more money in an hour than she would see in a year. Her feet were bleeding inside her worn shoes. Her back screamed with every movement. Her vision had started to blur from exhaustion around hour 14. And when she had entered the empty CEO's office at 2:47 a.m., an office she was never supposed to clean because it was always handled by a specialized team, but that team had called in sick and the supervisor had threatened her job if she didn't cover. She had seen a chair. Just for a moment, she had thought. Just 30 seconds to rest her legs. No one would ever know. The leather had embraced her like a cloud. The ergonomic support had cradled her aching spine in ways she hadn't known were possible. For the first time in 16 hours, the pain had receded. Her eyes had closed, just for a moment. That moment had lasted 17 minutes. And now, as the private elevator chimed its arrival on the 57th floor, Soo-min was about to wake up to a nightmare. Stop right here. I need you to do something before this story continues. Subscribe to this channel right now. I'm not asking, I'm telling you. Because what happens when that elevator door opens is going to shock you in ways you cannot imagine. This billionaire is known for destroying careers over misaligned pencils. He once fired an assistant for touching his desk phone, and now a cleaner is sleeping in his sacred chair. What do you think he's going to do? Subscribe, hit that notification bell, and drop a comment with your prediction right now. Because I promise you, you're wrong. Whatever you're imagining, the truth is something else entirely. Do it now, then keep watching. Alexander Kong, known to the business world as the Ice Emperor and to tabloids as Korea's most eligible bachelor, who will never be caught, stepped out of his private elevator at 2:48 a.m. and immediately knew something was wrong. The air was different. It wasn't something he could explain to people who didn't share his particular neurology. His brain processed environmental details the way most people processed obvious threats, unconsciously, automatically, with an urgency that couldn't be ignored. The cleaning cart in the hallway was positioned 3 inches to the left of its usual spot. The scent of industrial cleaning solution was stronger than it should be at this hour. And the door to his private office, his sanctuary, his controlled environment, the only space in the world where every single element existed exactly as he required, was open. His jaw tightened. Someone was in his office. Alexander had been called many things over his 34 years. Genius, billionaire, perfectionist, difficult, impossible, cruel. The last 3 were the ones people whispered when they thought he couldn't hear. He heard everything. His condition, obsessive-compulsive disorder, diagnosed at 7, managed through decades of therapy and medication and sheer force of will, made him hypersensitive to every detail of his environment. It was what made him brilliant at business. He saw patterns others missed. He noticed discrepancies others overlooked. He predicted problems others couldn't imagine. It was also what made him unbearable to be around. He knew this. He accepted it. He had built his life to accommodate it, surrounding himself with people who followed his rules without question, living in spaces designed to his exact specifications, maintaining routines that never varied. The rules existed because the alternative was chaos. And chaos, for Alexander Kong, was not an inconvenience. It was a form of torture. He walked toward his office door with the controlled fury of a man who had fired people for lesser infractions than unauthorized entry. Whoever was in there, whatever they were doing, they were about to experience the full weight of his displeasure. He pushed open the door and froze. There in his chair, the one he had commissioned at a cost of $47,000, the one that had been molded to his exact body measurements, the one that no human being was ever permitted to touch, sat a woman. A cleaner, judging by her uniform. Asleep. Her head was tilted back against the headrest. Her lips were slightly parted. Her hands, rough and reddened from years of manual labor, lay limp on the armrests. She looked exhausted in a way that went beyond tired. She looked depleted, drained, like someone who had been running on empty for so long she had forgotten what full felt like. Alexander should have exploded. Every instinct in his obsessively ordered brain was screaming at him to wake her up, to fire her, to have her escorted from the building immediately. His chair had been contaminated. His space had been violated. His rules had been broken. But he didn't move, because his hyper-aware brain, the same brain that noticed when pencils were misaligned and when papers were stacked at incorrect angles, had noticed something else. The woman's uniform sleeve had ridden up as she slept, exposing her forearm. And on that forearm, barely visible in the dim office lighting, was a pattern of scars. Not random, not accidental, organized. Parallel lines, evenly spaced, extending from wrist to elbow in a grid so precise it could have been measured with a ruler. Alexander recognized that pattern, not because he had ever seen it on someone else, because he had worn it himself. 22 years ago, before therapy and medication and the coping mechanisms that had slowly replaced self-destruction with obsessive control, Alexander Kong had carved similar lines into his own skin. The same precise spacing, the same methodical approach, the signature of a mind that couldn't handle chaos except by creating controlled pain. His breath caught in his chest. For the first time in years, for the first time since he had built the walls that protected him from the disorder of human connection, Alexander felt something crack inside him. Recognition. The woman stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, dark, disoriented, slowly focusing on the figure standing in the doorway. For a moment, she didn't seem to understand where she was. Then reality crashed back. Her face went white with terror. Oh God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I was just resting for a second. I'll leave immediately. Please don't. She was scrambling out of the chair, her exhaustion momentarily overridden by pure panic. Words tumbled from her mouth in a desperate flood. Apologies and explanations, and pleas for mercy that she clearly expected would fall on deaf ears. Alexander raised a hand. She flinched, actually flinched like she expected him to hit her. And in that moment, watching this exhausted woman cringe away from him like a beaten dog, Alexander Kong made a decision that would shock everyone who knew him. Sit back down. The words came out before he could analyze them, before he could run them through the filter of logic and self-protection that governed every interaction. Suman stared at him. What? You heard me. Sit back down. His voice was still cold. He didn't know how to make it any other way, but the fury that should have accompanied it was strangely absent. You look like you're about to collapse. But your chair, I know I'm not supposed to. Everyone says no one is allowed to. I'm aware of my own rules. Alexander moved further into the office, closing the door behind him. I'm choosing to make an exception. Suman didn't sit. She stood frozen, her exhausted body swaying slightly, her eyes darting between him and the door like she was calculating escape routes. You're going to fire me anyway, aren't you? Her voice was hollow. I've heard the stories. You fired someone for touching your desk phone. You made an assistant cry because she used the wrong color post-it notes. I'm I'm sitting in your chair. I'm already dead. What's your name? The question seemed to confuse her more than anything else. What? Your name. The thing people call you. What is it? Park. Park Soo-min. How long have you been working in this building? Park Soo-min. 3 months. And before that? Before. She shook her head, bewildered. I don't. Why are you asking me this? Why aren't you calling security? Alexander sat down in one of the visitors' chairs across from his desk. An action so unprecedented that if anyone had witnessed it, they would have assumed they were hallucinating. The CEO of Haesung Group did not sit in visitors' chairs. The CEO of Haesung Group did not sit anywhere except his own precisely calibrated throne. But the woman in front of him needed to feel like they were on equal ground. His instincts told him that much. I'm asking because I'm curious. I'm not calling security because I don't want to. He paused. Yet, Soo-min's legs seemed to give out. She sank back into the forbidden chair, too exhausted to stay standing, too terrified to fully relax. I don't understand what's happening. Neither do I. Alexander's eyes drifted to her exposed forearm. The sleeve had fallen back down, but he knew what was underneath. How many hours have you worked today? What? Hours? Today. How many? 16. I just finished my other job before coming here. And how many days a week do you work 2 jobs? 7. For how long? 18 months. Something tightened in Alexander's chest. 18 months of working every single day. No rest, no recovery, no space to exist as anything other than a machine designed to generate income. He knew what that kind of sustained stress did to a person. He knew because he had lived it himself, not for financial survival, but for psychological survival, drowning himself in work to avoid the chaos of everything else. What? Soo-min's jaw tightened. With respect, sir, that's none of your business. You're sitting in my chair. That makes it my business. Then fire me. Something shifted in her expression, fear giving way to a bone-deep weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. Fire me and let me go home. I'm too tired to play whatever game this is. It's not a game. Then what is it? Alexander didn't answer immediately. He was looking at her, really looking, in a way he rarely looked at anyone. Taking in the details, his brain automatically cataloged the calluses on her hands from years of manual labor, the shadows under her eyes that spoke of chronic sleep deprivation, the careful way she held herself, as if she was used to being invisible and preferred it that way, and the scars, hidden now, but burned into his memory. It's curiosity, he said finally, something I don't experience often. People usually bore me within seconds. You. He paused, choosing his words carefully. You're sitting in a chair no one has ever touched, and instead of panicking or groveling, you're telling me to fire you and let you go home. I'm panicking. I'm just too tired to do it properly. That's not panic. That's acceptance. You've accepted that this situation is out of your control, so you're not wasting energy fighting it. His eyes sharpened. That's a coping mechanism. I recognize it because I use it myself. Soo-min stared at him. Who are you? You know who I am. I know your name. I know your reputation. I know everyone in this building is terrified of you. She shook her head slowly. But you're not acting like the person they describe. The Alexander Kong from his stories would have had me thrown out by now. He wouldn't be sitting in a visitor's chair, asking personal questions about my work schedule. Maybe the stories are wrong. Are they? Alexander considered this. No, he admitted. They're mostly accurate. I'm exactly as difficult, demanding, and intolerant as people say. I have fired people for minor infractions. I have destroyed careers over misaligned paperwork. He paused. But I've never encountered someone asleep in my chair before. And I've definitely never encountered someone with scars like yours. Soo-min's hand flew to her sleeve, pressing it down protectively. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. His voice was quiet. And I'm not going to pretend I didn't see them. But I'm also not going to ask you to explain. Not tonight. Not when you can barely keep your eyes open. He stood. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to finish your shift, but you're not going to clean this office. You're going to rest. There's a couch in the executive lounge down the hall. no one will disturb you there. In the morning, someone from my office will contact you about a different position, something with regular hours and better pay. Sumin's expression shifted from confusion to suspicion. Why would you do that? Because I can. Because it cost me nothing. And because he stopped, surprised by his own honesty. Because I know what it feels like to be so exhausted that you stop caring whether you live or die. And I don't want anyone else to feel that way if I can prevent it. He walked toward the door. Wait. Sumin's voice stopped him. The chair. I sat in your chair. Everyone says that you would never. The chair can be cleaned. Alexander's hand rested on the doorframe. People can't. Get some rest. Park Sumin. We'll talk tomorrow. He left. And behind him, in the most forbidden chair in the entire building, a woman who had expected to be destroyed sat in stunned silence, wondering if she had just dreamed the entire encounter. If you felt that scene, if you felt the unexpected connection between two broken people recognizing each other, then like this video right now. Because what happens next is going to take everything you just witnessed and multiply it by 1,000. Alexander Kong doesn't make exceptions. He doesn't show mercy. He doesn't connect with people. But he just did all three. And now I need you to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and comment. Why do you think Alexander really spared her? Was it the scars? Was it something else he recognized? Drop your theory below, then keep watching. Because the truth is more complicated than anything you're imagining. Part 2. The investigation. Alexander Kong did not sleep that night. This was not unusual. His OCD often kept him awake, his mind churning through lists and systems and contingencies that demanded attention regardless of the hour. But tonight, the thoughts keeping him awake were different. Park Sumin. The name had been running through his head on a loop since he'd left her in his office. The image of her, exhausted, defiant, broken in ways she didn't want anyone to see, had lodged itself somewhere in his chest and refused to leave. By 4 a.m., he had given up on sleep entirely. By 4:15 a.m., he was doing something he had never done before, researching an employee who wasn't in a senior position. The information was easy enough to access. As CEO, he had visibility into every aspect of his company's operations, including HR records that most executives never bothered to examine. What he found made him feel something he hadn't experienced in years. Guilt. Park Sumin, age 27. Education. BA in music from Seoul National University, one of the most prestigious programs in the country. Former employment. Haesung Entertainment Division, Assistant Talent Development Coordinator. She had worked for his company before, in a completely different capacity, in a role that required creativity and expertise and skills that had nothing to do with cleaning floors. He dug deeper. 3 years ago, Sumin had been a rising star in the entertainment division. Her ear for music was described as exceptional in performance reviews. She had identified and developed 2 artists who went on to become major chart successes. Her supervisors called her dedicated, brilliant, indispensable. Then, suddenly, she had resigned. No explanation was given. No exit interview was conducted. She had simply submitted a resignation letter and disappeared from the company's radar. 1 month later, the same woman who had been on track for a management position reappeared, not in the gleaming offices of the entertainment division, but on the night cleaning crew of the corporate headquarters. Alexander stared at the screen. What the hell had happened? He kept searching. Medical records were private, but insurance claims told their own story. In the 18 months since Sumin had taken the cleaning job, she had been paying for someone else's health care. A Kim Hyung relationship listed as mother. The treatments were extensive, expensive, the kind of ongoing care that would drain any normal person's finances. The picture was becoming clearer. Sumin had left her promising career to take care of a sick parent. She had downgraded to whatever work she could get, work that was flexible enough to accommodate hospital visits, desperate enough to pay quickly, exhausting enough to leave her no time to think about what she had lost. And somewhere in that spiral, she had developed the coping mechanisms that Alexander recognized too well. The parallel lines, the controlled pain, the physical manifestation of a mind trying to create order in chaos. By 6 a.m., Alexander had made 3 decisions. First, he was going to help Park Soo-min, not out of charity. He didn't believe in charity, but because wasted talent offended him on a fundamental level, and leaving a music prodigy to clean floors was a waste he couldn't stomach. Second, he was going to find out who had failed to notice her struggles, who in his company had watched one of their best employees self-destruct and done nothing to intervene. Third, and most unsettling, he was going to see her again. Not because he needed to, because he wanted to. And Alexander Kong never wanted anything that wasn't strictly necessary. The summons came at 8 a.m. Soo-min had managed 3 hours of sleep on the executive lounge couch, more consecutive rest than she'd gotten in months, before a security guard had gently woken her with a message that she was expected in the CEO's office. She had expected termination papers. Instead, she found Alexander Kong standing by his windows, watching the sunrise paint the Seoul skyline in shades of gold and amber. He turned when she entered, and she was struck again by how different he seemed from the monster of company legend. He was tall, over 6 feet, with sharp features and dark eyes that seemed to process everything they saw with unsettling intensity. His suit was immaculate, his posture perfect, every element of his appearance precisely controlled. But there was something in his expression that hadn't been there the night before. Something almost human. Park Soo-min, thank you for coming. Did I have a choice? There's always a choice. But I'm glad you made this. 1. He gestured to a chair. Not his chair, but one of the visitors' seats. Please, seat. She sat. Alexander remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back in a posture that suggested military discipline. I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond. Soo-min's heart hammered against her ribs. Okay, last night, after I left you in this office, I did something I've never done before. I researched you, not because I suspected wrongdoing, because I was curious. He paused. I found your employment history. I know you used to work in my entertainment division. I know you left to care for your mother. I know you've been working 2 jobs for 18 months while paying for medical treatments that should have bankrupted you a year ago. Soo-min's hands clenched in her lap. That's private, I know. And I apologize for the invasion. But I need you to understand why I did it. Alexander finally sat, taking the chair across from her rather than retreating to his throne. I told you last night that I recognized your scars. I meant it literally. I have the same ones. He pushed up his left sleeve. There, faded but unmistakable, was a pattern of parallel lines extending from wrist to elbow. The same precise spacing. The same methodical arrangement. The same signature of a mind that couldn't handle chaos except by creating controlled pain. Soo-min's breath caught. 22 years ago, before I learned other ways to cope. Alexander pulled his sleeve back down. I'm not telling you this to make you feel obligated to share your own story. I'm telling you because I want you to understand that when I say I recognize what you're going through, I mean it. Not as a concept, as lived experience. Soo-min was silent for a long moment. Why does that matter? She asked finally. Why does it matter if you understand? You're a billionaire. I'm a cleaner. We exist in completely different worlds. Because understanding is rare. And because I think we can help each other. Help each other how? Alexander leaned forward. I have a proposal. Not charity, an exchange. You have skills that are being wasted cleaning floors. Music skills, according to your file, that were exceptional. I have divisions that need people with those skills. I'm offering you a position, a real position, with a real salary in the entertainment development department. Soo-min shook her head. I can't work regular hours. My mother needs flexible scheduling. Work from home when necessary. Whatever accommodations you need. Alexander's expression was implacable. I'm not offering you this position out of pity, Park Soo-min. I'm offering it because you're qualified, because your talent is being wasted, and because I suspect you're going to work yourself to death if something doesn't change. And what do you get out of it? The question seemed to catch him off guard. What do I get? You said it was an exchange. What's your side? Alexander was quiet for a moment. Company, he said finally. Conversation. Someone who understands what it's like to live with a brain that doesn't work the way it's supposed to. He paused. I have business advisors and executive staff and an army of assistants. I don't have anyone who knows what it's like to use pain as a coping mechanism because nothing else works. Sumin studied him. This was the man the entire company feared. The ice emperor who had destroyed careers over minor infractions. The billionaire who reportedly hadn't had a genuine friendship in decades. And he was asking her for company. What exactly would that involve? I don't know. I've never done this before. Alexander's honesty was almost disarming. Dinner, perhaps. Conversation. Something that isn't a business meeting or a corporate obligation. Something. He struggled with the word. Normal. You want to be friends? I want to try. I'm not very good at it. People find me exhausting and cold and impossible to be around. He met her eyes. But you didn't flinch when I told you about my scars. And you're still sitting here despite knowing what I am. So maybe you're someone who could tolerate me. If you're feeling this moment, the vulnerability in Alexander's voice, the impossible connection forming between two people who never should have met, then I need you to do something right now. Like this video. Not for me, for the story, for the algorithm that will show this to more people who understand what it's like to feel different, broken, alone. Like it. Share it with someone who needs to see that even the coldest heart can crack open. And drop a comment telling me, should Sumin say yes? Is this the beginning of something real, or is she walking into a trap? Comment now, then keep watching. Because her answer is going to change both of their lives forever. Sumin said yes. Not immediately, not easily, but after a long silence in which she weighed the risks against the potential rewards. A silence Alexander sat through without pressure, without manipulation, without any of the tactics he usually employed to get what he wanted. She agreed. One dinner, she said. One conversation. After that, I'll decide if I want to continue. Fair enough. And I'm not taking the job just because you're offering. I want to see the actual position, the actual responsibilities. I won't be anyone's charity case. I wouldn't expect anything less. And if this is some kind of elaborate setup, if you're using this to humiliate me or manipulate me, I will find a way to make you regret it. I don't care how powerful you are. Alexander smiled. It was a small expression, barely more than a shift in the corners of his mouth, but it transformed his face in a way that made Sumin's breath catch unexpectedly. I believe you, he said, and I'm looking forward to it. The next 2 weeks were an exercise in mutual discovery. Alexander's staff was bewildered by the changes in their boss's routine. He had always been rigid, arriving at exactly 7:15 a.m., eating the same lunch at exactly 12:30 p.m., leaving at exactly 9 p.m. Variations were unheard of. Deviations were cause for alarm. But now, there were dinners. Private dinners in the executive dining room, scheduled at irregular intervals, with a woman the staff only knew as the cleaner from the incident. The rumors spread like wildfire. Some said she was blackmailing him. Some said she was a secret relative. Some, the more romantic among them, whispered that the Ice Emperor had finally found someone who could thaw him. The truth was more complicated than any of them imagined. Their conversations ranged across everything. Music, philosophy, psychology, the peculiar experience of living with minds that process the world differently than everyone around them. Alexander talked about his OCD with a frankness he had never shown anyone, describing the rituals and compulsions that governed his daily life. Sumin talked about her mother's illness, her abandoned career, the grief that had been slowly consuming her for years. And they talked about the scars. Not in detail. Not with the kind of therapeutic exploration that would have felt like excavation, but in the way that two people who share a wound acknowledge its existence, quietly, without shame, with the understanding that some things didn't need to be explained. When did you stop? Sumin asked one evening, her voice careful. 16 years ago. After a particularly bad episode, my therapist helped me find other methods. Exercise, meditation, The obsessive organization that everyone finds so disturbing. Alexander's expression was distant. The urge never fully goes away, but I've learned to redirect it. I stopped 8 months ago. Sumin touched her forearm unconsciously, after I realized my mother might actually recover. Before that, I didn't see the point in stopping. I didn't see the point in much of anything. And now, she considered the question. Now I'm sitting in a billionaire's private dining room, talking about things I've never told anyone, wondering how I ended up here. Fate, perhaps. I don't believe in fate. Neither do I. Alexander's eyes met hers. But I'm starting to reconsider. The job offer, when Sumin finally reviewed it, was legitimate. More than legitimate, it was exceptional. A position in artist development that utilized every skill she had neglected for 18 months. A salary that would cover her mother's treatments with room to spare. Flexibility that would allow her to continue being a caregiver while rebuilding her career. It was almost too good to be true, which made her suspicious. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked Alexander during their fourth dinner. "And don't give me the line about wasted talent. You have an entire company full of talented people. Why focus on me?" Alexander set down his chopsticks with the precise alignment that characterized all his movements. "Because you broke a rule, and I didn't destroy you for it." "That doesn't answer my question." "Yes, it does. You just need to understand the context." He leaned back in his chair. "I've spent my entire life building systems, rules, structures that keep the chaos at bay. When those rules are violated, I respond with force. Not because I'm cruel, but because the alternative is intolerable. The chaos seeps in. The anxiety becomes unmanageable. The only way to restore order is to eliminate the source of the disruption. So you should have fired me. I should have done more than fire you. I should have made an example of you. That's what I've done before. That's what everyone expected me to do." His voice dropped. "But when I saw you in my chair, when I saw the exhaustion and the resignation and the complete lack of fear, something broke in my pattern. For the first time in years, I looked at a rule violation and didn't feel the compulsion to punish it. Why? Because I saw myself." Alexander's eyes were dark with honesty. "I saw what I would have become if I hadn't had the resources to get help. If I hadn't been born into wealth. If I had been fighting alone the way you've been fighting." He paused. "I couldn't punish you for being a version of me that had less luck." Sumin was quiet for a long moment. "You're not what I expected," she said finally. "What did you expect? A monster. The stories everyone tells, the firings, the tirades, the impossible standards. I expected someone who would enjoy destroying me. I don't enjoy destroying anyone. I simply don't know how to stop myself." Alexander's voice was hollow. "The OCD, it demands order. When order is violated, it demands restoration. I've spent my life trying to satisfy its demands, and the only method I've found is to enforce absolute control over my environment. That sounds exhausting." "It is." He met her eyes. "Which is why you're remarkable." "Me? What did I do?" "You violated my control in the most fundamental way possible. You touched something that no one is ever allowed to touch. You fell asleep in a space that should have been sacred." Alexander shook his head slowly. "And instead of triggering my compulsions, you quieted them. That doesn't make sense." "I know. It doesn't make sense to me either. But when I saw you in that chair, exhausted and defeated and too tired to pretend, the chaos I expected didn't come. I just felt." He struggled for the word. "Seen. Like I was looking at someone who understood what it cost to survive each day." Sumin reached across the table and touched his hand. It was a small gesture, barely a brush of fingers against skin. But Alexander went completely still, like a deer caught in headlights, his entire body freezing in a way that spoke of profound unfamiliarity with human touch. "When was the last time someone touched you?" Sumin asked softly. "Not a handshake, not a professional interaction. Just contact. I don't remember. Years. Maybe. I avoid touch. The sensory aspects of my condition. Unexpected contact feels like electricity, like an invasion. And now." Alexander looked down at her hand on his. Now it feels like peace. Subscribe. Right now. I need you to subscribe to this channel immediately. Because what's happening between these two people is more than a story. It's a recognition that some of us understand on a bone-deep level. The isolation, the coping mechanisms, the desperate hope that someone, somewhere, might see us and not run away. Subscribe. Hit the notification bell. And drop a comment telling me if you've ever felt what Alexander just described, the weight of living in a brain that works differently, the exhaustion of constant control, the longing for someone who understands without needing explanations. I want to hear from you, because this story isn't just entertainment, it's a mirror, and I think some of you are seeing yourselves in it. Part 3, the transformation, the change in Alexander Kong was visible to everyone who knew him. Not dramatic. Not overnight, but unmistakable. His executive staff noticed it first. The CEO, who had once required all paperwork to be aligned at exact 90-degree angles, now occasionally overlooked minor discrepancies. The man who had fired an assistant for using the wrong color folder now sometimes let small mistakes pass without comment. The company gossip machine went into overdrive. The board of directors grew concerned. But Alexander was oblivious to their speculation, because for the first time in his 34 years, he was experiencing something he had never thought possible. He was making a friend. Their dinners expanded to lunches. Their conversations extended to phone calls. Their carefully professional relationship began to blur around the edges in ways that neither of them fully acknowledged. Su-min started her new position in the entertainment division and discovered that the skills she thought she had lost were still there, dormant, perhaps, but not destroyed. She identified promising artists. She developed training programs. She found herself remembering why she had loved this work before tragedy had forced her to abandon it. And her mother's treatment was finally working. For the first time in 18 months, Su-min could see a future that didn't involve working herself to death. 3 months after the night in the chair, Alexander invited her to his home. Not his office, not a restaurant, his actual home. A penthouse so private that even most of his executives didn't know its address. Su-min arrived to find not the sterile, museum-like space she had expected, but something more complicated. Yes, everything was organized to precise specifications. Yes, the furniture was arranged with almost mathematical precision. But there were also signs of life. A piano in the corner, sheet music spread across its surface. Bookshelves filled with novels as well as business texts. A kitchen that actually looked used. "You cook," she said, surprised. "It helps with the OCD. Precise measurements. Controlled variables. And at the end, something tangible that I created." Alexander gestured to the living room. "I wanted you to see this. To see how I actually live. Not the office persona, the real version." "Why?" "Because I trust you." The words came out simply, without the careful calibration that usually characterizes speech. "I've never said that to anyone outside my immediate family. I've never meant it with anyone outside my immediate family. But I trust you, Park Su-min, and I wanted you to know what that looks like." She explored the penthouse slowly, taking in the details that revealed who Alexander really was beneath the Ice Emperor reputation. The photographs of his late parents, the childhood drawings he had kept, the small shrine to his grandmother in a corner of the bedroom. He was showing her his soul, and she understood the magnitude of that gift. "I trust you too," she said finally, turning to face him. "I didn't expect to. I came into your office that night expecting to be destroyed, and instead," she paused, gathering courage. "Instead, you saved me. Not just the job, not just the money. You saw me, the real me. The broken parts one hide from everyone else. And you didn't run. Why would I run from something I recognize? Most people do. Most people see the scars, metaphorical or physical, and they decide it's too complicated, too difficult, too much work." Su-min's voice cracked. "I've been alone for so long because I assumed no one could tolerate the weight of everything I carry. You're not alone anymore." The words hung in the air between them. Alexander took a step closer. "I need to tell you something," he said. "And I need you to understand that I've never said anything like this before. That I don't know the right way to express it. That I'm probably going to do this wrong. Say it anyway. I think I'm in love with you." Sumin's heart stopped. "I know it's too soon. I know we've only known each other for 3 months. I know there are 100 reasons why this is a terrible idea. Power dynamics, professional complications, the fact that I'm almost certainly going to be exhausting to be with." Alexander's composure was cracking, revealing the vulnerable man beneath. "But I can't stop thinking about you. I can't stop wanting to talk to you. I can't stop feeling like everything in my life was just preparation for the moment you fell asleep in my chair." "Alexander, you don't have to answer. You don't have to feel the same way. I just needed you to know. I've spent my whole life hiding what I feel because feeling things is chaotic and unpredictable and terrifying. But with you," he stopped, struggling for words. "With you, I don't want to hide. I want to be seen. Even the parts of me that are broken." Sumin closed the distance between them. "I'm not going to pretend I'm not terrified," she said quietly. "I've spent the last 3 months wondering if this was real or if I was imagining things. A billionaire CEO with OCD, interested in a former cleaner with a history of self-harm. It sounds like a story someone made up. It's not made up. I know. That's what makes it terrifying." She reached up and touched his face, the second time she had initiated physical contact, and he still went completely still at the sensation. "But I'm more terrified of walking away, of going back to being alone, of pretending I don't feel what I feel just because it doesn't make sense." "What do you feel?" "The same thing you feel. Love. Connection. The sense that someone finally understands the parts of me I can't explain." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I love you, Alexander Kong. Against all logic. Against all probability. I love you." He kissed her. It was gentle, careful in the way that someone who rarely experienced physical intimacy would be careful. His hands trembled slightly as they came up to frame her face, like he couldn't quite believe she was real. When they separated, both of them were breathing hard. "I should warn you," Alexander said, his voice rough. "Being with me won't be easy. The OCD, it affects everything. I'll have compulsions that don't make sense to you. I'll need routines that might feel restrictive. I'll struggle with spontaneity and chaos and all the things that normal relationships involve. I know. And you still want this?" "I want you." Sumin smiled. "The messy, complicated, exhausting, brilliant you. I want all of it. If you're feeling what I'm feeling right now, the hope, the beauty, the recognition that 2 broken people have found each other, then I need you to do something. Like this video. Not for statistics, not for algorithms. For the people who need to see that love doesn't require perfection. That connection is possible even for those of us who have been told we're too much, too difficult, too broken. Like it. Share it with someone who needs to believe that their struggles don't disqualify them from love. And drop a comment telling me, do you believe in this kind of love? The kind that sees the broken parts and chooses to stay anyway? Comment now. I want to hear from you. Because stories like this only matter if they reach the people who need them. The announcement came 6 months later. Alexander Kong, the Ice Emperor, the man who had sworn he would never marry because no one could tolerate his condition, was engaged to Park Soo-min, a former cleaner who had been discovered sleeping in his forbidden chair. The media went insane. Headlines ranged from the romantic, billionaire finds love in unexpected place, to the skeptical, what's her secret? To the outright hostile, gold digger snags corporate titan. Soo-min weathered it with the same stubborn grace she had brought to everything else in her life. They don't know you, she told Alexander when he raged about the coverage. They don't know us. They're telling a story that fits their expectations, and when they realize how wrong they are, they'll find something else to write about. How are you so calm about this? Because I've survived worse. I've survived losing my career, losing my health, nearly losing my mother. Tabloid gossip is nothing compared to the weight I've already carried. She smiled. And because I know the truth, they can write whatever they want. It doesn't change what we have. The wedding was small, private, held in Alexander's penthouse with only immediate family and a handful of trusted friends in attendance. Sumin wore a simple white dress that she had picked herself, refusing the designer options that Alexander's assistants had presented. He wore a charcoal suit, perfectly fitted, with one small deviation from his usual style, a pocket square in a slightly asymmetrical fold, a nod to the chaos he was learning to embrace. His vows were precise, carefully crafted, written and rewritten over weeks until every word was perfect. But when he stood facing Sumin, with their small gathering watching and the sunset painting the windows gold, he set aside the paper he had prepared. "I had something written," he said, "something that followed all the proper conventions and said all the expected things. But you've taught me that sometimes the unexpected is more valuable than the perfect." He took her hands. "I'm not an easy person. I never will be. I have a condition that will require management for the rest of my life. I have habits and compulsions and needs that most people would find unbearable. I had accepted long ago that I would spend my life alone because asking anyone to tolerate me seemed unfair." His voice cracked, and then you fell asleep in my chair, exhausted, broken, too tired to even pretend you weren't struggling. And instead of seeing a violation of my sacred rules, I saw myself. I saw someone fighting battles that no one could see. I saw someone surviving despite everything. I saw the person I had been waiting for my entire life. Sumin's eyes were streaming with tears. "I vow to see you," Alexander continued, "to see the real you, every day, even when you try to hide. I vow to accept the parts of you that you consider broken, because they're the parts one recognize and love the most. I vow to build a life with you that doesn't require either of us to pretend we're something we're not." He squeezed her hands. "I vow to love you, Park Sumin, not despite your struggles, but including them. Not in spite of your scars, but because of what they taught you. I vow to stand beside you for whatever comes, because facing it together is infinitely better than surviving alone." Sumin wiped at her tears. "You were right about the written vows," she managed. "That was better." "I know." Alexander smiled, that small, rare expression that only she seemed to be able to coax from him. "I'm occasionally right about things." Their kiss was witnessed by the dozen people who had been invited to share the moment. But for Alexander and Sumin, the world had narrowed to just the two of them. Two broken people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, who had chosen to face their chaos together rather than alone. 3 years later, their story had become legend. Not because of the tabloid coverage or the corporate gossip, but because of what they built together. The Kong Foundation for Mental Health launched with Sumin as its public face, dedicated to providing resources for people struggling with conditions like OCD, depression, and the kind of invisible battles that society preferred not to acknowledge. It funded therapy. It trained counselors. It worked to destigmatize the struggles that both Sumin and Alexander had faced. Alexander's company underwent a cultural transformation. The Ice Emperor remained demanding. Excellence was still expected, and mediocrity was still unacceptable. But the fear that had once permeated the organization slowly began to fade. People learned that their CEO was human, complicated, imperfect in ways that made perfection possible to aspire toward. And in their penthouse, now decorated with signs of a life shared between two people, Alexander and Sumin built something neither of them had ever expected. A home, not just a physical space, but a relationship that accommodated both of their needs. Routines that respected Alexander's compulsions while allowing room for spontaneity. Open conversations about mental health that would have been unthinkable in either of their pasts. The kind of partnership that proved damaged people could love and be loved. Their son was born on a Tuesday. Alexander had the nursery organized to precise specifications. But when Sumin pointed out that babies did not respect specifications, he had laughed and agreed to accept a certain level of chaos. "He has your eyes," Sumin said, holding their newborn for the first time. "And your stubbornness, I expect. Let's hope so. Someone will need to keep you in line." Alexander looked at his wife. This woman who had changed everything by breaking the one rule no one was allowed to break. At his son, this new life that represented a future he had never dared to imagine. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For falling asleep in my chair. For being too exhausted to run. For giving me a chance to be something other than what I was." Soo-min reached for his hand. "Thank you for seeing me. For not being the monster everyone warned me about. For proving that the most unexpected places can hold the most important discoveries." They sat together in the soft light of the nursery, two people who had been alone for so long, finally home. And somewhere in that moment, both of them understood that their story was proof of something important. That brokenness wasn't the end. That connection was possible. That love could find you in the strangest places, even in a forbidden chair, at 2:47 a.m., when you're too tired to run anymore. The Yindi. If this story moved you, I need you to do 5 things right now. First, like this video. Like it because it matters. Like it because every click tells the algorithm to show this story to someone else who needs to see it. Someone who's struggling, someone who feels broken, someone who has given up on the idea that they could ever be truly seen and loved. Second, subscribe to this channel. I tell stories about people who face impossible odds and find connection anyway. About broken hearts that learn to love. About the unexpected moments that change everything. If this resonated with you, there's more waiting. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. Third, share this video. Send it to a friend. Post it on your social media. Show it to someone who needs to believe that their struggles don't disqualify them from happiness. That their brokenness is not the whole of their story. Fourth, drop a comment. Tell me which moment hit you hardest. Was it Alexander seeing his own scars in Soo-min's? Was it the moment she touched his hand and he finally felt peace? Was it the wedding vows? Tell me what stayed with you. Fifth, and this is the most important, remember that you are not too much. You are not too difficult. You are not too broken to be loved. Whatever you're carrying, whatever invisible battles you're fighting, there are people out there who will see you and choose to stay. Not despite your struggles, but including them. Not in spite of your scars, but because of what they taught you. You just haven't found them yet, but you will. Like Alexander found Soo-min. Like Soo-min found Alexander. Like two broken people found each other in the most impossible circumstances and proved that love doesn't require perfection. It just requires showing up. It just requires being seen. It just requires the courage to stay when running would be easier. Thank you for watching. Thank you for engaging. Thank you for being part of this community. And remember, sometimes the most forbidden places hold the most important discoveries. You just have to be brave enough to sit down.